Hey guys, Miss Cook here. So we've been talking a lot about scatterplots, and now we are going to be looking at scatterplots and talking about outliers and clusters. So first, I'm going to explain the word outlier. So think of the word out means outside. Liar, it's lying. So it's going to be lying outside of my data. So looking at this scatterplot right here, we don't have really outliers. So if I was to look at my data, all of this it's all kind of bunched together. Now, if I was to add this point right over here, this guy would then be my outlier. That would be the outlier. It is outside where my data lies. And same over here. I could add one over here. This would also be an outlier. Again, an outlier is outside of where the data lies. So let's look at some examples. So here's our first graph. Now let's look for our outliers, the ones that are away from my data. So hopefully you're seeing two because we have this group right here. There's the group of my data. And we have, so I'll circle that and then let's choose a different color. Let's do green. This is an outlier and that is an outlier. We have two different outliers on this one. Again, let's look at this one. We have an outlier. I'm going to circle my data in red. And if we look, we have this guy right here. There's my outlier. It's outside of where my data is. Now this next one, let's look at it. Circle my data. Well, there is no outliers on this one. There's nothing over here. There's no data over here and no data over here. So on this one, there's no outliers. Okay, so now we're going to talk about clusters. And clusters are group or groups of data gathered together. So if you look right here, we have two clusters. We got this cluster and this cluster. There's a lot of different data going on, but it's all packed in one group. So let's look at more examples. So here we have several things going on. We got all of this data right here, but actually our cluster is right here where all this data falls in like a big group. So there's our cluster. Now over here, we got a good group of cluster right here where all the data kind of falls together and another cluster right here. This would not be an outlier because this whole entire thing is my data. So that don't think that's an outlier. We just got two clusters of data. Now, checkpoint. Determine if the graph has outliers. So outliers, clusters are both. So let's look. Well, I would say this has some outliers. I'm going to do outliers in green. Look, we have an outlier here, way up there. I would say this is an outlier down here, and this would be an outlier. They're away from my data. They lie outside of my data. And let's do blue for my clusters. So looking at clusters, we got this big cluster of data right there. So for this graph, it has outliers and it has a cluster. Oh, it was the same picture. So it looks like that's our only example. Sorry, guys. Remember, outliers outside my data. Clusters are grouped together, very tight together groups of data. So please let me know if you guys have questions. We miss you. Good luck on your guys' Google form and keep working hard. You are all doing an amazing job. Bye.